when Gopi asked me to come and speak here, I was wondering what I can say to you that's useful and interesting, because most of the people here probably know almost everything that I would say, and are working in the similar or same fields and understand the technology space pretty well. So I thought about this one insight that I had when I was doing my PhD in 1997, or finished it in 1997, which has led my life since. And I thought I will expand more on that, not because you don't know it, most of you have heard it by now, but maybe not have had thought through or had the time to think through all the various ramifications. And the purpose of my talk is very simple. If I am successful, most if not all of you, based on this talk, will make one simple small or big change in your life, because the era we are heading into is going to be dramatic, which one way or the other. But before I get going, I have to answer Gopi Chand's question, which is I think the first known data scientist, at least in my memory, was Tycho Brahe. And Tycho Brahe discovered that when he was plotting the orbits of the planets around the sun, there was this mild disturbance, and all the other scientists had dismissed it as noise, and one man's noise is another man's data, and Kepler's laws came out of that. In many ways, we are also in this era dealing with some of the movements and some of the shifts that are going on in our society as noise, and it's not noise, it's significant shifts which are underway. So many of you have seen a graphic like this. The bottom right is from the Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil, and the top left is from my office mate at Carnegie Mellon, Hans Moravec. It talks about essentially codifying intelligence as a bunch of computing. There are three dimensions actually. The third dimension is sensors, which are not put up there, but the two dimensions, computationally the human mind has memory and it has processing, right? Common wisdom is that around 2023 or 2028, depending on who you talk to, a $1,000 processor is going to have, and memory is going to have the computing power of the human mind. I actually think that is off. I think the number is closer to 2035 because I don't think the human mind's ability to transact has been fully understood yet. But sometime in the next 10 to 15 years, we will have a chip in our laptop which has the same computing power as us, except it does not stop and does not get tired and has infinite perspective, right? So why is this so important? I mean, this is a technology shift like every other technology shift. Most people in the front benches have gone through at least one or two technology shifts in their lives, and they have seen how jobs come and go and so on. But this one is different. This one, by the way, this is exactly what Gopi was talking about. This is a processor, the competitor to the NVIDIA processor that Gopi talked about. This has 72 cores. It's called Skylake, just came out. And you can actually, in the graphics course that each of them have, do general purpose programming and accelerate whatever processes you are building, assuming it's data driven, by a factor of 100 at 1/10 the footprint. And this tiny chip is at the heart of this revolution I call the infinity era. And what I mean by the infinity era is very simple. We are heading into an era of infinite productivity. People like to call it the robotics era and the automation era, but economically it's the era of infinite productivity. And my definition is very simple. What I mean by infinite productivity is that any innovation you create, any product you have, any process you create has so much productivity that without people, and in most cases a handful of people, that process or product or manufacturing line or whatever it might be has the potential to reach the entire planet if the planet so wants it, right? So let me repeat that again. Any product created by a team or an entrepreneur or a process has the potential to be deployed at scale planet-wide without effort from people. And we are going to hit that inflection point whether or not we are right about 2025 or 2035. By 2025, almost everything we do today can be deployed at scale without people. And that creates a disruption and I don't like to call it disruption because that word is overused. It disrupts pretty much every human endeavor that man has known, other than probably one which we will discuss. So, before I proceed beyond the rest of the talk, I want to make sure that this message sinks in, because if nothing else I want to make sure that you understand this is real. This is not science fiction, this is not a bunch of data scientists crunching numbers and drawing a graph. This is real, it is amongst us today, we just have not seen the dots, we have not connected the dots, we have not connected the dots and the data patterns that are already among us. So, let me start with Toyota. Toyota has been doing this for more than 15 years. Many of us, including PJ, who is sitting here in the front, my colleague from Carnegie Mellon, studied Toyota, which was automating its car manufacturing lines when we were younger. And here's a picture of that in front of you. If you go to Japan and visit the Toyota line, there are about 16 engineers mulling around having tea, coffee or sitting and programming. There is nobody working on the line except these robots. And this is how, when they make a Lexus, they are able to get the tolerance of 2 panels in a Lexus down to microns, not even millimeters. Many people will say that that's cool, robots are in the factories, we all know that. Well, they are coming out of the factories, and many of you know this as well. The automated cars, which are, the research is underway, the first set of cars are being sold in the West right now. The permission has not been given to sell them in India. But if you bought a Mercedes E-Class or S-Class in the West and you got on the road, on a highway you would be able to go hands off. Similarly Tesla and similarly Audi soon and so on. By 2020 semi-autonomous cars will be passe, it will be a $100 billion industry. By 2025 India, I expect that more than 6 million people who make their living as drivers today, either in the trucking industry or the car industry, will not have jobs. The reason I say that with such confidence is the cost of automating driving today is about $10,000, and that is going to go down, and most of it is just computing and sensors. And Moore's law, plus or minus, it will go down to a couple of $1,000s. The amortized cost of a driver is far more than a couple of $1,000s. And you have household robots which are starting to do everything from sweeping floors to this young Indian lady who has invented this thing called Rotimatic, which you put in flour, water and you program a recipe, and not only does it mix the dough, it makes rotis and cleans itself. $400, right? And Japan always leading the way, always doing weird things. They have many restaurants in Tokyo are starting to have robots serve the food, and this is now a novelty. For 4 or 5 years from now, this will be so cheap that it will be most moderate to low end restaurants in the West will start having waiters and serving staff and cleaning staff which are robotic rather than people. Simple economics. So people will say that's fine, menial labor, semi-skilled labor, maybe like service industry and the checkout counters and so on, they will be automated, but more creative jobs will then reign supreme. Let's talk about a creative job. Here's a release from AP Wire, and if you see a similar release from Forbes about companies' third quarter or fourth quarter results, you'll have the same thing. There's an author written there, and here's an article. One guess for why I put it up. Most of AP Wire sports and most of Forbes company quarterly results reports are automatically generated. And the reason why there's a person's name there is this is usually an intern or a junior writer who gets to review it before it gets published. So writing, and many of you have seen the output of automated art creation based on a theme and automated music. If not, that will be something you can search on the internet. Now people will say, okay, these are interesting, these are low level jobs. What about the high end skills that we rely on, which requires experts in the field, people who are trained for years together? On the bottom right is there are 3 finalists. These are 2 of the finalists of the Tricorder Prize issued by Qualcomm, which is going to come to fruition in about a year. It's the final panel jury, like Tata Innovista, they're going to have a similar event in San Diego in about a year. And the challenge is very simple: create a single device which you can carry handheld, which can diagnose and do prognosis and issue prescription or the remedy for about 80 common diseases. right? And tricorder, of course, because of the Star Trek heritage, and the McCoy. The two pictures you see in front of you are already solving 40 of them. The finalists are already halfway there, and the question is, the winner will be the one that actually is the lowest cost and the highest, and we expect these things to be in the $1,000 range. On the upper left is a lady who is going to go into operation at Johns Hopkins using a device which is going to replace her anesthesiologist. I don't know how many of you have a medical field, but anesthesiologists are some of the more important people in an operating theater, more important than the surgeon, because if a little bit less anesthesia and you are in severe pain and you go into shock, a little bit more and you won't wake up. And that anesthesiologist has to have years of experience, and they usually let out by themselves at the age of 30 to 35, because you really do kill people. It's not just you will debilitate them. If you don't do it right, you kill people. And there are 4 stages of surgeries in terms of complexity. Stage 2 is now under FDA approval, and stage 4 is in clinical trials, which means a trauma patient anesthesia can be administered by this machine. And I can go on and on. The reason I went actually on and on for the last 3 slides is I wanted to make sure that you understood that this is real and this is here. And when I say here, this is not just here in the US, it is here in India. If you go and talk to Chennai, to the successful automotive part manufacturers, right, they will tell you, and I have several friends, they will, and what they have told me is, look, in 2004 I used to have 70 people, today I have 70 people, my output has gone up by 10-fold. And I have told my 70 people that of them 30 are engineers and the other 40 can leave anytime they want. I will give them 70% salary, but because of Indian labor laws I cannot fire them. So I am keeping them on my payroll, right. And moving to Delhi, when I go to Delhi and talk to my ex-colleagues who I went to grad school with, some of them are running the family business in handlooms and so on, and they have 120,000 spindles spinning yarn, one person for 120,000 spindles, and they come to me saying, hey, that one person, I don't mind paying him, but the quality control is not that good, can you get me a way to automate that, right. So and this is happening not because of this one innovation, but the chip is going to drive myriad of innovations which are going to end in the same result. That's the mind being replaced, and it so happens that almost every enterprise that we do is driven by the mind, and the rest is mechanical, which we solved a long time ago. Now here's the problem. It's all very cool because we have 7 billion people on the planet, 4 to 5 billion people really don't have a good life, and 2 billion people are literally starving. In India alone, 750 million people have don't have 2 square meals a day. Not even 3, they don't have 2 square meals a day. So automation is necessary for us to destroy this and disrupt this pyramid which has been taken care of, the upper echelons of society since the dark ages. And but automation also has a different problem. If you have infinite productivity and able to convert every known natural resource into whatever product you want, you can end up with a earth that looks like the bottom right, which is a scorched earth. Global warming is an indication, but we have no idea what we can do when in the next 10 years we will be able to literally at the stroke of a pen, politicians can decide that everybody shall have a car. Like there are some states in India that decide that everybody shall have a TV. Somebody will say everybody shall have a car, and we will have the ability to do that. That is the scary part. I am starting to touch on the problems that we are going to face. So not only is it going to be just this explosive growth where we have to figure out as corporate citizens and as engineers, what do we do and what do people do. We also have to figure out how do we protect and safeguard our environment through this transition, because we will have literally the ability to make mischief at a global scale, something that we don't have right now. The other problem, this is a good problem, but it's a serious problem nonetheless, is the same computing chip is reaching the hands of every person on the planet, and it's going to be embedded in a smartphone or other device which is going to make the entire world transparent to them. And in many ways, ignorance is bliss, and that ignorance will disappear, and when that ignorance disappear, the Arab Spring will look like a spring. We will have social unrest of a scale that humanity has never faced. half of humanity is going to move from rural to urban in the next 20 years, and while doing that they are going to be asking questions like, why is this person who is living 1.5 kilometers away from me or 200 meters away from me having such a better life? Why does my child not have the same opportunities as their child? And that aspiration which is becoming apparent in India now, which was far less 2 decades ago, is going to be explosive 10 years from now. And when that happens, we as a society are not even close to being ready to deal with that. We do not have the political system, nor a feedback system, nor a corrective system to deal with that. And all of this is going to happen in an environment where instead of 2 billion jobs, we are going to need about 500 million people or less. That is very conservative. 500 million people or less to run the machine we call our industrial age. And while facing the threat of wiping out pretty much every every plant on the planet, while facing the threat of 5 billion people rising in revolution. So I call all of this together the flashpoint. And the flashpoint will be upon us. It will be apparent to us in about 5 to 7 years, and it will have irreversible momentum in about 10 years, and 15 years from now it will be history. All the decisions that need to be taken would have been taken, and it is moving at a scale which is very hard for even innovative large companies to react to, let alone governments which react at the pace of decades, and that is the worry, right. We as a society have never had to react this fast at such a large scale to any notion. I mean, the only other threat that can be far more immediate is a large asteroid heading towards us, but barring that, this is the largest force. It is like a tsunami heading towards us, and many of us are aware of it, but we are like frogs in boiling water. It is happening slowly enough that we do not understand the implications of this. And having said that, every problem needs to have a solution, and unfortunately the solution here is not top down. And I will walk through my own personal journey of handling one of the, so this insight led me to move to India and start building products to hopefully shift certain parts of the system that I could help with. And one of the insights I had is that poverty is not a resource problem, poverty is not a monetary allocation problem, poverty is simply an information problem. And the reason I say that is I did a study along with a few scientists of every known cause of poverty or every known situation in which people have poverty, and not one of them was not tied to a significant information issue or a missing information system. So some of the pictures here codify that. The construction industry, most construction workers, you do not realize, pay 20 to 30% of their wages to the broker who has given them their job every month, not one time, every month, because after that job is over they do not know where else they will get a job. And the simple answer, a simple information system that could give them transparency and fairness, is missing. The average driver in Bombay, if you take the 3 sigma of their income, it is about 40 to 50%, and if you stretch it will be 80%. The 3 sigma of all the engineers who are working in Bombay is a factor of 10. It is tenfold, and meanwhile drivers are 30-40%. The reason why is the driver has no way when they arrive at the door to demonstrate to you that they are a superb driver versus a mediocre or low end one. So you end up essentially paying everybody the same modulo what they can negotiate, and so on and so forth. I can keep on going with those examples, but now having said that, there are ways to build information systems, and it is probably one of the key things that needs to be done to prepare for this coming era, right. And the way this information looks like is it is actually information that exists, it is all around us, but it is some information that is accessible, not just inaccessible not just to us, but it is actually inaccessible to everybody in the community, not just people who are below the poverty line, but people who are above who can do something about it to help them. And I call it dark knowledge. It is dark because it is actually binding us down, holding us back, and if it was lit up, it would create a world that is much nicer and much more brighter. Speaking of dark knowledge, this is what the world map looked like in 2005. This was my personal journey from 2005 to 2010. And when I moved to India and I realized that the maps I was used to using and taking for granted in the US were no longer here. Not only they were no longer online, they were actually did not exist anywhere. I went to Survey of India, I examined all the maps they had, and then I went to several other developing countries and I realized that the developing country simply does not have maps. And maps are required for development, but unfortunately development is necessary for maps, but because the cost of mapping was $15 per kilometer, you needed a GPS truck. Long story short, I had the insight that the only way to create maps for the developing world was to let people do it themselves. If there are 4,000 people living on a street, one of them will be motivated enough to draw that street if you give them the tools to do so. And at that point, we created something called MapMaker. And what MapMaker did simply was give you the entire canvas of the globe and allow you to draw your maps. And we solved a couple of computational problems. Computational geometry was one, building a truss system was the another, and a bunch of user interface issues. And when we did that, we had a tool where everybody could map, and the truss system made sure that all the maps that went live were of high quality. So here's a time-lapse video over of 3 months of Madurai being mapped by people of India on MapMaker when it went live in August 2008. We launched MapMaker in 2007. It was the first product that Google ever launched, which was launched in Pakistan and Philippines first because they were lower priority countries, and India second because it was a lower priority but slightly higher priority country, and then Eastern Europe, and then the US versus the other way around. And the reason why they did that is nobody believed that MapMaker would actually succeed. And this is the other problem we are going to face. So in 2010, another 2 billion people had been mapped. So instead of a billion people now today, 2016, about 4 billion people are living in areas which have rich maps around them. Now this is this is the journey that many of you are on in various stages, people who are innovating in this room. But there is a sinister problem. When you start having innovations which start scaling so rapidly that it is hard for even experts in that field to keep up and start touching the entire planet, when you have an innovation of that potential, that kind of an innovation is called a paradigm shift. Right? A paradigm shift is a technology shift that hits at global scale in a very short period of time. When that happens, organizations turn upside down. So letting down a little bit of my own hair here, I got into deep trouble for doing MapMaker in 2005, even inside a company like Google. And I will tell you, before I tell you the story, that there is no villain other than human nature. And to codify the trouble, to quantify the trouble I got into, the project I was in, that MapMaker, was cancelled 6 times. And I myself was fired 3 times, and Larry and Sergey had to rescue me each of those 3 times. And the reason why I got into such trouble is I was doing it in India. The team that ran maps was in the US, and they had no idea what I was doing. I tried to explain, they did not understand. I said, look, people will map, and they're like, you're going to destroy our product. And this communication gap is partly because of the distance, but it's actually more because of human nature. Those of you who are cognitive psychologists in this room may have heard of this thing called confirmation bias or cognitive dissonance. And confirmation bias hits you like a truckload as an organization when you have this innovator who really cannot explain what he's talking about or she is talking about because it's live in their head, and when words come out, they don't make any sense to anybody else. And they don't make any sense especially to the people who are curators of the technology, people who are the experts in that field, and people who care the most will resist them the most. So the people who actually resisted me the most and fought with me for 4 years happen to be very nice people. I mean, these are people who with their own money will donate millions of dollars to a charity and try to make a green earth happen and so on. But they fought me because they thought I was actually going to destroy what they had built. And when they realized, 4 years later, when they realized that what I was doing was trying to help, they became friends of mine, and they actually became champions of the project. And to give you a sense of the impact that MapMaker had, South Sudan, when it became independent, it was the first African country to succeed without violence and atrocities, because George Clooney decided to use MapMaker to make sure that every atrocity is mapped. He said, look, I cannot stop it from happening, but I'll map it. The West cannot say it did not happen, and that apparently was enough to prevent the atrocities from happening. Ushahidi is a movement that began on MapMaker, where women started creating apps to map violence against women, against children, and so on. In Africa, it has now gone worldwide. And closer to home, when Pakistan got flooded in 2010, by that time the users of Pakistan in both England and Pakistan had mapped Pakistan completely. The government of Pakistan and the UN reached out to us and asked for the maps. At that point, 10% of the population, 18 million people, were displaced, and they sent us a letter 3 months back after we gave them the maps that 800,000 people they rescued, of which their estimate was 250,000 people would have died had it not been for the maps that came from MapMaker, which was interestingly built by people and built on a platform that would not have survived had I not been pig-headed and survived the journey inside the organization itself. And the heroes of this upcoming revolution will not be people sitting just in this room, they will be out there. So, the person highlighted there is a guy called CNR Nair, and he took it upon himself when this tool was out to map rural Kerala. Rural Kerala became the first state in the entire developing world to have rural maps. And he spent 4 years doing it, knowing fully well that he had cancer and passed away, but he accomplished his mission, left behind a team of 100 people who are still flushing out maps of Kerala. And my own personal journey and journeys like CNR Nair has taught me one thing, that the upcoming era not only needs technology but also needs us to answer one of the most ancient of all questions, without which our own human nature, not technology, our own human nature will end up damaging the planet if not destroying it. And the simplest question, that the ancient question I am referring to, is what is our purpose? Why are we born? What is our purpose on this planet? Because most of the damage we do is when we are running on automatic using patterns that we have learnt or inherited and have not answered this question. So, leadership in the next 2 decades needs to focus as much inside as outside. And in my own example, what changed in 2010 that caused my own problems to go away inside Google was I went off for 20 days on a meditation retreat and came back, and magically everything changed. And what had changed was just myself. I learnt to forgive the people who I was fighting with, and my wife pointed out that, look, you went off, you went away and came back, none of the other people had changed and the problems had disappeared, so the problem was in you. Right, and she's always right. And the price I had to pay was also significant, because in those 6 years I worked so hard to keep this project alive that I saw my daughter awake only once every Sunday when I took her out for lunch. The rest of the time I left before she woke up, and I came back home after she slept, because in the first 3 years I was the only guy programming it. They took my team away and so on. And which brings me to the other fundamental insight, and the only way to solve, I mean, at least in my own journey, the only way I found that I could think through these problems is start with the basics, right? Start with understanding reality as is, start with the basics and go back to age old wisdom, and that has the answers along with technology that we need to have. And the picture in front of you is a simulation of the universe put out by MIT. Each of those specks of light is a galaxy, which has more each galaxy has more stars than grains on a beach of in the Chowpatty beach, and we are on one sun, on one planet in one of those galaxies and in a speck of time. So, anything we are doing for ourselves, for our ego or for our immortality is really futile, right? And when you have those insights and you start working towards, and then I am able to clear myself of whatever else that has been driving me, then whatever gives me happiness, which is usually around doing things with others and for others, comes up. With that I will stop, and thank you.